Welcome back. Today we're going to be starting the inequalities unit. We're going to start that inequalities unit by talking about two-step inequalities. So let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. So here we have a few steps to solving two-step inequalities. The first thing we're going to do is eliminate our constant. We're going to do that by eliminating the constant using the inverse operation, either plus or minus. Then we're going to eliminate the coefficient using the inverse operation. That's either going to be multiplying or dividing. Remember, now this is key. This is the whole thing that makes solving inequalities different than solving equations. Remember to flip the inequality if you multiply by a negative number. Only if you multiply by a negative number is it important. It doesn't matter if you multiply into a negative number, only if you multiply by a negative number. And remember, we're always going to graph our solution to inequalities on a number line. And speaking of number lines, let's take a closer look on how exactly to do that. So when it comes to graphing number lines, we're going to draw and label a number line to begin with. Then we're going to place either an open or closed circle on the number line, depending on the sign that we were given. So if we have greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, we're going to use a closed dot. And if we just have greater than or less than, we're going to use an open dot. Once we've done that, we're going to draw an arrow to the right if the x is greater than, and we're going to draw an arrow to the left if the x is less than. So now, armed with our tools about how to solve and how to graph, let's take a look at the first example. So here at example A, we've got negative 1.4w plus 8 is greater than or equal to 17.8. So our first step here is that we're going to draw a wall down from our inequality symbol. Then we're going to make sure that we're going to get rid of our constant. Our constant in this case is positive 8. So we're going to use the inverse operation. We're going to subtract 8 from both sides. Draw a line indicating that we've completed a step. Bring down my negative sign. Bring down my 1.4. Bring down my w. Bring down my sign. I didn't flip it because I didn't multiply or divide by a negative. 17.8 minus 8 is going to be 9.8. And now we're on to our next step. The second step we're going to do is, again, our inverse operation. We've got multiplication here, so our inverse of that is divide. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 1.4, divide the other side by negative 1.4. These are going to cancel, bring down my w. Now I did divide by a negative number, so since I divided by a negative number, I'm going to change or flip my sign. And when I do that, my answer is now going to be less than or equal to rather than greater than or equal to. And 9.8 divided by negative 1.4 is going to be negative 7. So that's my answer to this problem. So what does this solution mean? It means that all numbers less than or equal to negative 7 are solutions. So any number that I pick, not just negative 7, but any number that is less than negative 7 will also make this inequality true. So negative 9, negative 209, negative 2009, these are all numbers that are less than negative 7, so therefore they are solutions to my graph. In order to show this, I'm going to show this on my number line now, using that arrow that we talked about earlier. That arrow pointing on forever and ever in one direction shows that all those numbers in that direction are solutions to our inequality. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to draw our negative 7 here right in the middle of our graph. Then we've got negative 6, negative 5, and on the other side we've got negative 8 and negative 9. Now that we have our graph labeled, we're going to decide whether we need an open dot or a closed dot. And since we have less than or equal to, we're going to have ourselves a closed dot. So we're going to put our closed dot right here at negative 7 on our number line. And then we're going to determine whether our arrow is going to go to the left or the right. And since we're looking for the numbers that are less than, all the less than values are over here to the left. So that's which way our arrow is going to point. Now that we've done that, we've both solved and graphed our inequality. So let's go ahead and take a look at example B. So here we are at example B. It says negative 7 is less than x divided by 2 plus 3. So we're going to need to solve our inequality first. We're going to start by drawing our wall down and then eliminating our constant. Our constant in this case is positive 3. So the inverse operation is negative 3. We're going to subtract 3 on both sides. They're going to cancel. Bring down my x, bring down my divide by 2, bring down my symbol, bring down my negative 7 minus 3 is going to be negative 10. Now that I've done that, I'm not going to flip my sign. I didn't multiply or divide by a negative, so now I'm going to go on to my next step here. I've got division, so the inverse operation of that is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. 2 and 2 are going to cancel. Bring down my x. I did not multiply or divide by a negative, so my sign stays the same. I did multiply into a negative, but I did not multiply by a negative, so my sign stays the same. 2 times negative 10 is negative 20, and I've got my solution there. X is greater than negative 20. So that means that all the numbers that are greater than negative 20 are going to be solutions to my inequality. So now let's label our number line. So I'm going to put a negative 20 right here in the middle. I need to determine, do I need an open dot or a closed dot? Looks like I only have greater than, so I'm going to have just an open dot. And I want all the numbers that are greater than negative 20, so those numbers are going to be on the right. So I'm going to draw my arrow to the right-hand side, and I'm done. I've got both my examples solved and graphed. Remember, the answer is not just negative 20. The answer is the whole thing. X is greater than negative 20. It's not an equation. There's not just one answer. There are multiple answers, and we need to make sure that we write out the entire solution in order to get the answer correct. Now let's take a look at example C. Here we are at example C, and we're not going to panic just because we see fractions. We have to remember that fractions are a part of us, and we're going to just work through them slowly to make sure that we get them correct. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a wall down from our inequality symbol. Then we're going to make sure that we're going to move our constant, which in this case is 3/8. So we're going to do that by subtracting 3/8 on both sides of our inequality. So negative 3/8 on both sides. Those are going to cancel. Make sure we're going to bring down our 1/4 x. And we're going to do 9/8 minus 3/8. Luckily, they have the same common denominator, so I don't have to do anything messing around with that. So I'm going to just do 9 minus 3, which is going to be 6. And since we're talking about eighths, we're going to have 6/8. We don't need to flip our signs because we didn't multiply or divide by a negative, so we're going to just bring our sign down, and now we're on to our next step. So in this case, now we're going to be getting rid of our fraction. We got 1/4, so we're going to have to do the inverse of that. That's going to be 4 over 1. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4 over 1. These are all going to cancel on my right-hand side. Bring down my x. I did not multiply or divide by a negative, so my sign stays the same. And now I'm going to just do 8 times 1, which is going to be 8, and 4 times 6, which is going to be 24. And luckily, 24 divided by 8 does reduce, so 24 divided by 8 is 3. So our solution is x is greater than or equal to positive 3. So now we need to graph that on our number line down there at the bottom. So we're going to put 3 right in the middle. Now we need to determine, do we need an open dot or closed dot? Looks like we have greater than or equal to. So that's going to give us a closed dot right here on the 3. Then we need to determine which way our arrow is going to be going, either right or left. Looks like x is going to be greater than, which means we're looking for all the numbers that are greater than 3. So 4, 7, 1,037,037. All those numbers are going to be to the right on our number line. So we're going to draw an arrow to the right. And that brings us to the end of example C. Now let's go take a look at example D. So example D is going to be a little trickier for us to solve. We've got x minus 4 all over negative 2 is less than positive 10. So the first thing we're going to do, like we always do, is we're going to draw our wall down from our inequality symbol. And then the next thing we usually want to do is get to that negative 4 by either adding or subtracting. But we can't because the whole thing is being divided by negative 2. So we're going to have to get rid of that negative 2 first in order to get to that negative 4. So the whole thing's being divided. So the inverse operation for us is going to be multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by negative 2. So they're going to cancel out here, bring down our x minus 4. And then since we multiplied by a negative number, it doesn't have to be the last step, it has to be any step. And in this step, we did multiply by negative 2, so we're going to have to flip our sign. Now 10 times negative 2 is going to give us negative 20, and we're on to the last step of our equation here, or sorry, inequality. So we're going to add 4 to both sides because the inverse operation of minus is plus. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. Those are going to cancel. Bring down my x. I didn't flip my sign this time because I did not multiply or divide by a negative, so sign stays the same. Negative 20 plus 4 is going to be negative 16, and that's my final solution. X is greater than negative 16. So now we're going to graph that by putting a negative 16 on our number line here right in the middle. We now determine if we need an open dot or a closed dot. Looks like we've only got greater than, so we've got an open dot. And then we want all the numbers that are greater than x, so greater than is going to be over here to our right. And that brings us to the end of example D. Let's move on to that last example. So here we are at example E, and it looks like they've thrown us a little bit of a curveball here because we've got two variables. We've got a 2x and a negative 4x that we're going to have to do something with before we solve our inequality. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw down a sign down, or a line down from our inequality symbol, and then we're going to have to combine like terms before we can go any further. So we're going to have to combine our 2x and our negative 4x together before we can solve this inequality. So 2x and negative 4x is going to give me negative 2x. Then bring down my positive 5, bring down my sign. I didn't do anything to the other side, so the sign is going to remain the same. And then bring down my negative 15. The next thing I'm going to do is get rid of my constant, so I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides of my inequality. These are going to cancel. Bring down my negative 2x, bring down my sign that's going to remain the same because I didn't do any multiplying or dividing by a negative. Negative 15 minus 5 is going to be negative 20. And now we're on to our last step, which is going to be divide both sides by negative 2. Divide both sides by negative 2. These are going to cancel. Bring down my x, and since I did multiply or divide by a negative, I'm going to flip that sign, and then negative 20 divided by negative 2 is going to be negative 10, so that is our solution. X is greater than negative 10. So let's go ahead and put that on the number line. We're going to put a negative 10 right here in the middle. Then we need to determine are we going to have an open dot or closed dot. Looks like we have greater than or equal to, so we're going to earn ourselves a closed dot here. And then we need to determine is our arrow going to go to the right or the left. Looks like we have greater than, so all the numbers greater than negative 10 are going to be on our right. And that brings us to the end of graphing that inequality. And that brings us to the end of this video. So if you like this video, go ahead and throw us a thumbs up. If you love this video, go ahead and throw us a sub, and we will catch you in the next one.